So mainstream media has started talking about the UFO discussion a lot more than in the past, right? I mean, you're seeing footage come out, you're seeing more people that are, I guess, experts, if you will, on this subject that are being interviewed on mainstream media. Tucker Carlson has like a whole, segment that he does on UFOs quite regularly now. They're diving into the topic a lot more easily. Now, the UFO community, if you will, i.e. people that have been following this subject for many, many decades, are a little bit skeptical about the fact that the mainstream media has now entered this conversation in the way that they have. Arjun was making me laugh there a little bit, but no big deal. We're just going to continue on with it. So, I mean, Arjun, we've been talking about this for a while.
Yeah.
The idea that eventually one day, and I remember we used to even have some sort of like, yeah, but should we cover that if the mainstream media said it? Oh, should we do this, right? Because we were always sort of using discernment about this idea that if the mainstream starts covering this UFO topic, what is it really going to be? Is it a control of the narrative, right? What's happening? So you've been seeing a lot of different comments, a lot of different things going on out there, and you had this idea, hey, let's start talking a little bit about some of the potential deception or what's really going on with this mainstream coverage.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comments saying this is all deception, some sort of New World Order agenda to manipulate us all, blah, blah, blah. I mean, when it comes to mainstream media, we've covered the fact that there's a tremendous amount of deception from mainstream media. So we can clearly see through the lies of mainstream media on so many different topics when it comes to the war on terror, for example. So what's to say it's any different with UFOs? And that's a great point. Right now we're seeing a lot of UFO information leak out, and who's to say it's not deception? My point is that prior, there might be deception, there might be some sort of agenda, false flag alien invasion, whatever. But the point is, right now, it's just a disclosure campaign. The first step, even if it is a deception campaign, to let the population know UFOs are real and extraterrestrials are manning them. I think that's the campaign going on. Whether they're going to take that and use it for deception remains to be seen. But I still think UFOs and extraterrestrials are real, and that it's not deception because mainstream media ridiculed it for so long. People were getting killed. This topic was suppressed for so long. Meanwhile, in light of so much evidence, so they covered it up. But now they've done a complete 180 switch, and now they're covering it because it's kind of
because now
so
it's
obvious.
Become trendy and so obvious. And so
there was a ridicule campaign behind it
from the CIA.
Yeah,
exactly.
In the day. So why would they ridicule it if they want to get it out there?
Right. So. I think back then it was about hiding it so that the public didn't know about it. But we've long sort of held this theory, and it's this idea that it's like, at the end of the day, if you understand that things are going to change, right? That there's a shift taking place, that people's consciousness is opening up, that the world can't always just stay the way it is, that it's going to evolve, and that if you have that feeling within yourself, that you understand the reign or the rule, if you will, of these powerful shadowy individuals behind government and so forth, if you understand, you follow that feeling that they're not going to be in power all the time, that humanity is waking up to what's going on, we're stepping outside of the illusion, we're starting to awaken within ourselves, right? If you see and believe that that is happening and you can feel that, then at the same time, we're going to start to see changes out there. The mainstream media is going to change a little bit, right? Sometimes stuff is going to leak out. It's going to give us an opportunity to talk further about things. Yes, they're going to try and play along with it and sometimes, throw in little deceptive things here and there, whatever, but things are going to change, right? I think the process is, and this is really what it's about, is that although there are changes happening within the mainstream media, and they're now having to talk about these subjects because people are awakening, at the same time, they're likely going to try and push things out, right, through the guidance of those who have created these disinformation campaigns within the CIA and so forth, these shadowy governments, right? They're going to try and do it such that they protect themselves. Exactly. That they don't implicate themselves as being the ones who were covering up the lie this entire time. Right. But they'll come up with some grandiose, good reason as to why that they were, hey, we were hiding this because we needed to study this and understand it so that terrorists couldn't come in and do this, that, or whatever.
Or there was a threat.
Right, and we needed to figure it out first before we told people, right? We needed to know that it was safe, right? They're going to come up with this, and they'll use politicians and presidents and so forth to push this message to convince everybody, oh yeah, that's right, our government was taking care of us the whole time, I get it, right? That's going to happen, and we've taken that theory. We've talked to people like Stephen Greer before, where they said, they're going to. He's been involved in briefing politicians, for example, on this. He's like, they're going to try and tell this narrative in a way that benefits them. When it's time to come out, when there is disclosures, it's going to benefit them. So I mean,
Right.
I think everybody can kind of see and feel that.
Yeah.
But it's like, to you, what are the ways that people can look at what's happening in the mainstream media and sort of determine how are they trying to control it versus what the independent media has been saying along, which is just, hey, just tell everybody.
Yeah, well, basically, right now they're not admitting to a number of different things, like the fact that we've known about this for a long time, that they're leaving so much out, that the fact that we have, like, based on my research, we know a lot of these objects are extraterrestrial. Right now, mainstream media is, okay, UFOs are real. As far as, are they extraterrestrial? They haven't really touched on. They've gone as far as, I've seen a lot of things saying it's just classified military programs. Maybe they're using UFO disclosure to debunk the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
That's right.
So.
And just say it's all military.
Yeah, and just say it's all military. So that could be a possibility. Maybe they're using it because they want to create fear, and therefore they can justify the weaponization of space and more heightened security measures. Stuff the same way they use terrorism. So, I mean, for anyone who hasn't come across this subject, I'm sure most of our readers have. I mean, mainstream media is not a good source for finding out what's going on with UFO topic. And there's a lot of deception, not just from mainstream media. Even within the UFO community, there could be a lot of deception. You just got to use your discernment and go with what resonates from you and look at a variety of sources. And basically, that's what I do.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we know UFOs are real. I believe we definitely know some of them are extraterrestrial, and that they're here and they've been here and they come and go. And there are multiple different species, and some human-looking, perhaps some not, and some benevolent, some malevolent. There's a lot we don't know, but I think it's safe to say there's a lot we know.
Right.
At the same time too.
And it's a matter of, and this is one of the key questions, because I mean, I even had a friend ask me the other day, and it's a good question when you haven't entirely looked into the subject in a lot of detail, because the challenge is that a lot of times when it comes to this subject, I mean, we've been covering this for a long time, and I know you've been researching it a long time. I mean, I grew up watching X-Files, but beyond that, when I was young, I only watched documentaries and little bits here and there. I didn't get super deep into the investigation of UFOs until, a little bit into CE, when it was like, well, man, the subject has a lot into it. Let's, really dive into it. But a lot of people don't realize that the extraterrestrial phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, right, which you could say are two sort of separate things, because one has a certain amount of more evidence or is a little bit more widely spoken about than the other, if you will. But a lot of people think that it's like, well, okay, like the question brought up to me was, sure, it's an identified flying object, right? You see it on radar. Yeah. How do you know that identified flying object is something of extraterrestrial origin, or really is something that we don't really know what it is, right? Michael Shermer sort of made fun of it in a TED Talk that he did, where he throws a hubcap and he takes a picture of it, and he's like, this is a UFO, and you could look at it and say, yeah, that's a UFO, but really it's just a hubcap. It was identified because you didn't know what was in the air, what was flying, but really it was just a hubcap. And people, I think, are sort of speculating that the UFO phenomenon is not based on evidence coming from high-ranking military and government sources, but that is coming from people witnessing objects in the sky and claiming these are UFOs. There's not a realization culturally as a society that this subject is taken way more seriously in these military, government agencies and so forth.
Serious.
It's super serious, and all of the credible information, if you will, comes from those sources. And if you say, okay, well, maybe all of the documents and so forth were just placed there. They're not real. They're not accurate. Okay, that's perhaps an option. Why would they be doing that? I don't know.
Yeah, they frown upon people going and looking at declassified documents. A lot of documents have been released quietly before all this mainstream media stuff came out in like the 90s. There were documents you can get through the Freedom of Information Act. I mean, they never wanted people to know that UFOs are real, and now all of a sudden
you can't hide it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, the question sort of becomes like, have we as people, right, into the subject or not, really done the evidence to realize, like I say all the time, sure, they're I'm sure you would 100% agree with this. They're starting to say, oh yeah, UFOs are real. Well, along with that sentence, you could say, comma, and we do know that extraterrestrials man some of them, because we do know that.
Yeah.
It's been well documented, the whistle has been blown very well.
There's a lot of evidence for it,
right.
Yes.
So to say that we don't really know what's going on, yes, this is where you could say there's still a bit of a deception, a bit of a manipulation, right? Because what's happening is one, they're trying to control, they're trying to decide, right? The government is trying to decide what are the people ready to hear, how are we going to tell it to them, and how are we going to tell it to them without us getting in trouble and having people sort of think, oh, well, you were lying to us this whole time, why were you doing it?
Right. Then what gets me is that there's still a lot of people out there who think the whole UFO ET thing is some sort of New World Order agenda.
Right.
Some
So
evil
what's
agenda.
the premise behind why they think that?
I don't know. I think it's just a super, taking conspiracy overboard, because you can see New World Order stuff with the war on terror, for example.
Yeah.
You can see New World Order agenda with surveillance. Stuff that's put out there in the mainstream media, beamed out, 9/11, terrorist attacks here and there. Oh, we got to go save, we got to go invade these countries, bring democracy to these countries. It's out in our face. The UFO topic was never out in our face. It was covered up.
Right.
And they wanted to cover up big time. If it was part of the New World agenda, it would be in our face.
Right.
Now that it's undeniable, they're putting it out there because they want to try and somehow control the narrative. The idea that we're being visited goes back a long time, and there's so much evidence of it. And the idea that it's being used as some sort of New World Order agenda, all of this is fake, doesn't really hold much credit other than, to the, in this conspiracy theory realm, you've got a lot of, we still need to critical think. A lot of things that have been deemed a conspiracy theory are not a conspiracy theory, but then you have a lot of group of people out there who just go overboard, really.
Right.
It's kind of like the flat Earth thing.
Right.
I don't mean to insult people who think the Earth is flat, but
there's no evidence.
Yeah, as far as the evidence is very weak, and that kind of thing. To say that it's part of a New World Order deception agenda, yeah, they might use it for that. There might be some false flag alien invasion, stuff like that. But as far as the idea that we're not alone in the universe and that we've been visited and we have been visited, I think that's just a fact that lays on its own.
Right.
And I think eventually humanity is going to be out there, will be the extraterrestrials one day.
Right.
There are people who believe we've never even been into space and we don't have the technology to go there. I mean, there's just so much evidence that counters that.
And there was a recent interview between Kerry Cassidy and John Lear. Mm-hmm. And John had sort of gone back on a lot of his assertions from the past, which, to be honest, in the interview, I watched the part of it where they had a disagreement. She didn't really give John a chance to explain why he had changed his perspective. There could be good reason for it. But John had gone back on the idea saying that, humanity, secret space program, nobody's been to the moon. Whereas previously, he was talking about, we've been to the moon, there's secret bases, there's a secret space program.
So he went back?
He went back on it, saying that the entire secret space program is only happening in Earth's low orbit.
Interesting.
And he came out and said this. And she called him out, saying, hey, hold on a second. What happened here? You're going back. But unfortunately, he was a little bit rude to her. She got a little bit defensive in my perspective. And so the conversation, I felt like, got derailed a little bit. And it didn't really get to where I thought it was going to go, which is okay. But why? Why did he go back on that? Are these people suddenly changing their stories? What's going on, right? And so it's an important time to be discerning and to know what's going on. And this is also where nuance is key, right? And going back to the conspiracy thing that you were talking about is, it's been hard for 10 years. We get thrown in this sort of conspiracy bucket of, regardless of the fact that we're critical thinking, regardless of the fact that we're doing a lot of deep research and we're trying to speak only off of stuff that we know is factual or that we have some very solid evidence for, because we talk about similar subjects that people who don't provide any evidence for, but they just kind of say things, we get thrown into that bucket, right? Mm-hmm. And it's an interesting time because now more than ever, the need for this high quality investigative journalism that a lot of authors and so forth have been doing, but their work sometimes doesn't become viral, doesn't become prominent, doesn't become daily. And so here we're picking that up and saying, let's make this stuff daily. Let's make this part of news and media that we can consume regularly. And now is the time. Now is the time where there's a need for this shift in media where, yeah, you can cover these topics in a highly credible way that isn't just some blogger throwing out some random conspiracy stuff that takes people down a conspiracy rabbit hole, if you will, that is completely based off of just conjecture the entire time and forming a perspective and forming a reality around that instead of critically thinking and saying, hold on a second, that could be true. And let's keep it on the table as it could be true. But how do we get there? How do we make sure that that's true instead of just being like, well, it's a UFO conspiracy for blah, 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 blah. Well, there's no evidence of that. Right? And that's not to say that it isn't possibly true, but where's the evidence? We have to explore that.
All evidence points to the idea that the global elite, the one who have been doing this New World Order agenda through the war on terror, this and that, surveillance, taking away our rights, all evidence points to the fact that a lot of them for a long time didn't want this information to come out, that it threatens that agenda.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's actually, the evidence points to the opposite of that thought.
Exactly. I'm gonna do a quick little experiment where I'm testing on Google. I typed in UFO collective.
There's got to be a pop-up for us.
And when I do that on DuckDuckGo, I get results for collective evolution. When I do that, I get multiple results. When I do it on Google, we're not on the front page at all.
Google sucks for us now. So censored.
Yeah, and this is the challenge, right? Is Google is like we covered in one of the other segments. I mean, Google is censoring the narrative. It's stopping.
They completely censor my WikiLeaks Moonbase article now.
Right.
I mean, it's shut down on Facebook, doesn't get any hits.
Right. So yeah, exactly. And so here's
it
a
went
WikiLeaks
so viral
cable.
it got their attention for
right.
sure. Yeah.
You got a WikiLeaks cable that's showing people that hey, there was awareness that there was a base on the moon, owned allegedly by the U.S. that Russia comes in and destroys. This is the alleged story that's covered in this WikiLeaks cable. Keep in mind, WikiLeaks have never had to retract a particular story that they've put out, right? So this is what this cable talks about. Arjun writes an article talking about that cable, and it goes viral, and now it's like, that's funny. And I'm gonna do it just because I have to right now. I'm gonna WikiLeaks live. You guys are watching this happen. WikiLeaks Moon Base Collective. We got it on Google. Top. I have to go
There's
very
no way
specific.
we can't get that because
I have to go very specific.
I think we're the only ones who covered it.
Yeah. We actually outrank the wikileaks.org. Now this is interesting. I wonder if over time that ranking is going to change like we've seen with a lot of other stuff, because that article was so viral that we're outranking in terms of the search engine, we're outranking the actual WikiLeaks discussion around this, which is fine. But will it soon be censored and removed off that ranking? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But that's it. That's all. Just a little bit deeper insight, a little bit of discernment, right? This is what we need, the nuance, right? This is now a time that is so important when we're in these discussions of quote unquote conspiracies to be the voice that's more grounded in, okay, yeah, let's explore this stuff. What you're saying is potentially true and on the table. But before we jump to, yes, the whole world is about, this is all about depopulation and blah, 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 all these crazy things, which again, could potentially be true. But let's look into it. Let's create a culture that can take this information mainstream because it's well done, well researched, and well recorded, and is not based on, hey, I'm making a prediction of here's what's going to happen in the next 3 months, and this is my prediction, and you got to go out there and you got to tell everybody this is going to happen as if it's a matter of fact, but there's no evidence and nothing to support it. This is what creates the doubt within the mainstream about alternative media. This is what makes people look like they're tinfoil hat wearing individuals. It becomes very easy when you give a ton of ammunition to the mainstream and to the average person to say, what you're saying is ridiculous. Whereas when you bring the truth mixed with all the evidence and all the facts there, and you focus on that, which there's plenty to focus on, it makes it very hard to actually, ignore that stuff and to say, hey, you know what, that's all just a conspiracy theory. So that's part of the reason why we wanted to do this, is cover a little bit about, this quote unquote deception that might be taking place here, but also reminder, it's about bringing high quality investigation to this entire thing. And of course, your subscription to CETV here is helping to fund high quality investigation into these subjects so we can make it mainstream. Thanks for being here.